There is an old trucker legend that says, if you drive long enough into the dark, the road stops being asphalt and starts being something else. Something alive. My name is Jude, and in 1997, I broke the cardinal rule of Highway 50. I looked back. I didn't stop for the man standing in the middle of the desert, but as I soon found out, he didn't need a door to get in. There are roads in America that mapmakers draw with a ruler, straight black lines cutting through nothing but sagebrush and silence. And then there is Highway 50 in Nevada. In 1997, Life magazine named it the loneliest road in America. And they weren't kidding. No cell phones, no GPS, just you, the asphalt, and the creeping suspicion that the darkness outside your headlights goes on forever. My name is Jude Kincaid. I wasn't driving for the scenery. I was driving a beat-up 1988 Ford LTD from Chicago to San Francisco because I owed money to men who broke kneecaps for a living. I had $300 in cash, a glove box full of stale beef jerky, and a bladder that was about to burst. It was 2 a.m. The air conditioner had died somewhere near the Utah border, so I had the windows down. The desert air was hot, smelling of ozone and dry dirt. A dry thunderstorm was brewing miles to the north, silent flashes of purple lightning illuminating the jagged silhouette of the mountains, like camera flashes in a graveyard. I was pushing 80 miles per hour, praying the radiator wouldn't blow, when my headlights caught it. About a quarter mile ahead, standing directly on the double yellow line, was a person. "Jesus!" I hissed, slamming my foot onto the brake pedal. The Ford shuddered, the tires squealing in protest as the heavy chassis lurched forward. I didn't come to a full stop. I slowed down just enough to realize I wasn't looking at a stranded motorist. It was a man, at least it had the shape of a man. He was wearing a suit that looked 3 sizes too big, the fabric flapping violently in the wind. But he wasn't hitchhiking. He didn't have his thumb out. He was standing perfectly rigid, arms pinned to his sides, facing away from me, staring into the infinite blackness of the desert. My gut screamed at me, "Do not stop." It wasn't a rational fear. It was primal. It was the feeling a gazelle gets when the wind changes direction. I slammed my foot back onto the gas. The Ford roared. I swerved into the oncoming lane to bypass him, giving the figure a wide berth. As I passed, I couldn't help it. I looked. I looked right at him through the passenger window. He turned his head. In the fraction of a second that my headlights washed over him, I saw nothing. No face. Just smooth, pale skin where eyes and a mouth should have been. It looked like uncooked dough molded into the shape of a head. I screamed, a raw, involuntary sound, and mashed the accelerator into the floor mat. The car fishtailed, gravel spraying as I fought to keep it on the road. I checked the rearview mirror, expecting to see him chasing me, running on all fours like a coyote. But the road behind me was empty, just the red glow of my taillights fading into the dark. "Just a trick of the light," I muttered, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "Just the exhaustion. You've been awake for 30 hours, Jude. You're seeing things." I drove for another 20 minutes in silence, my heart rate slowly returning to double digits. I convinced myself it was a mannequin dropped by a prankster. I reached over to turn up the radio, hoping to find a signal, anything to drown out the silence. That's when the car lurched. It wasn't a mechanical failure. It felt physical. The entire chassis dipped to the right, the suspension groaning as if someone, or something, heavy had just sat down. I froze. Ding, ding, ding. The sound was piercing in the quiet cabin. On the dashboard, a red light flickered to life. Fasten seatbelt. I slowly turned my head to the right. The passenger seat, which had been empty a second ago, was now depressed. The worn fabric was stretched taut, molding around the shape of invisible hips and thighs. Someone was sitting next to me. I stopped breathing. The air in the car, previously stifling and hot from the desert night, instantly dropped 20 degrees. It wasn't just cold, it was a vacuum, a void that sucked the warmth right out of my skin. My eyes were glued to the passenger seat. The fabric was undeniably pressed down, cupping the form of a heavy, invisible occupant. "Who's there?" I choked out, my voice sounding small and pathetic against the roar of the engine. There was no answer, just the creak of the car's springs shifting as the weight adjusted itself, getting comfortable. Panic, sharp and blinding, overrode my logic. I slammed on the brakes. I didn't care about the transmission or the tires. I just wanted to stop the car and bail out into the desert. But the brake pedal wouldn't budge. It felt like there was a brick wedged underneath it. I stomped on it with both feet, putting my entire weight into the motion, but the pedal was rigid. The Ford continued to cruise at 80 miles per hour, gliding down the pitch-black highway as if on autopilot. Then, the seatbelt on the passenger side began to move. I watched in paralyzed horror as the strap slowly pulled itself out from the pillar. It floated across the empty chest of the invisible passenger, the nylon webbing taut against nothingness. It hovered for a second, then slid down to the receiver. Click. The sound was as loud as a gunshot in the silent cabin. The red fastened seatbelt light on the dashboard flickered and died. "Let me out," I screamed, grabbing the door handle. I yanked the lever. Locked. I pulled the manual lock pin up, but it was yanked back down with a violent mechanical thud, almost pinching my fingers. I tried again. Thud. The power lock switch on the armrest started clicking rapidly. Lock, 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 lock. A manic rhythm that matched the hammering of my heart. "You didn't stop," a voice whispered. I whipped my head around. The voice hadn't come from the empty seat. It had come from the speakers. I looked at the radio. It was an old Delco unit with a cassette deck. I hadn't touched it, but the frequency dial was spinning on its own, the orange needle dragging across the numbers. Static. Hiss. Pop. Static. "Who are you?" I yelled at the dashboard, sweat stinging my eyes. "What do you want?" The radio dial stopped on 104.5. There was no station out here, just white noise. But the static began to chop, to mold itself into syllables. It sounded like a voice trapped under ice. "Rolls of the rad," the static rasped. "I didn't see you," I lied. "I didn't see you, man. Just let me go." The car swerved. The steering wheel jerked in my hands, fighting my grip. The invisible passenger was grabbing the wheel. I wrestled with it, my forearms burning. But the strength of the thing next to me was unnatural. It wasn't just steering. It was aiming. The headlights swept across the desert scrub, illuminating a rusted signpost flashing by. "No services, next 80 miles. "Where are you taking me?" I begged, the tears finally spilling over. The radio static surged, louder this time, hurting my ears. "You owe a debt," the radio hissed. "You drive. I navigate." Suddenly, the invisible presence shifted. I felt a pressure on my right thigh, a cold, heavy hand. I could feel the individual fingers, thick and icy, clamped down on my leg. It squeezed. I screamed as the pressure increased, feeling like a vice grip crushing the muscle against the bone. "Turn," the radio commanded. I looked ahead. There was no turn. It was just a straight highway. "Turn where?" "There's nothing there." "Turn. Now." The steering wheel was yanked violently to the left. The Ford screamed as it left the pavement, hitting the dirt shoulder at 80 miles an hour. Dust exploded over the windshield, blinding me. We were barreling straight toward the open desert, bouncing over rocks and sagebrush, into the darkness where the lightning was waiting. The Ford LTD should have disintegrated. We were doing 60 over open scrubland, smashing through sagebrush and slamming over hidden boulders. I felt every impact in my teeth, the suspension screaming like a dying animal, the frame groaning under the torture. But the car didn't stop. It didn't even slow down. It was being held together by a will that wasn't mine. I took my hands off the wheel. It was useless to fight it, and braced myself against the roof, sobbing. "Please, I have money. I have $300. Take it." The radio crackled, the volume swelling until the speakers rattled in the doors. "Currency is not paper," the static garbled. the voice sounding deeper now, like stones grinding together. You run from debt, but debt follows. Suddenly, the violent bouncing stopped. The roaring noise of gravel pummeling the undercarriage vanished. The silence that followed was instant and terrifying. We were still moving, gliding smoothly now. I wiped the dust from my stinging eyes and looked out the windshield. We weren't on the dirt anymore. We were on a road, but it wasn't Highway 50. It was a narrow single-lane strip of asphalt that looked ancient. Cracks ran through it like black veins, and grass grew tall and pale through the fissures. The headlights cut through the darkness, revealing that the desert around us had changed. The sagebrush was gone. In its place were rows of tall, rusted spikes driven into the ground, hundreds of them lining the road like a fence. And on every spike, something was impaled. License plates. I saw plates from Texas, Ohio, Florida, New York. Some were new. Most were rusted, twisted metal from decades ago. A graveyard of travelers who had taken the wrong turn. "Where are we?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The invisible passenger shifted again. The seat creaked. The pressure on my leg vanished, leaving a numb, throbbing ache. "The shoulder," the radio hissed. "End of the line." The engine cut out. No sputter, no stall, just instant death. The power steering failed, the lights on the dash died, and the Ford rolled to a silent stop in the middle of nowhere. The only light came from the lightning flashing silently overhead, closer now. In the purple strobes, I saw it. About 50 yards ahead, the road simply ended. It didn't fade out. It was cut off by a sheer cliff edge. And parked at the very lip of that abyss was a tow truck. An old, rusted 1950s model, black as oil. The passenger door of my car clicked. I flinched, pressing my back against the driver's door. The handle turned. The heavy door swung open into the night air. The seatbelt unbuckled itself, retracting slowly. The cushion of the seat rose as the weight lifted. Thump, thump. Footsteps. Heavy boots hitting the asphalt. But there was no one there. I watched the gravel on the road crunch under invisible feet as the entity walked around the front of my car. I scrambled for my door handle, adrenaline surging. This was my chance. If I could run into the dark, maybe I could hide. I yanked the handle. It opened. I fell out onto the pavement, scraping my hands, and scrambled to my feet. "Hey!" a voice shouted. A real voice, a human voice. I froze. Standing by the rusted tow truck at the cliff's edge was a man. He was wearing a grease-stained mechanic's jumpsuit. He held a tire iron in his hand. He looked terrified. "Did you bring him?" the mechanic yelled at me, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "Did you bring the passenger?" I didn't mean to," I stammered, backing away. The mechanic didn't look at me. He looked at the space in front of my car, the space where the invisible footsteps had stopped. "I fixed the truck!" The mechanic screamed at the empty air, falling to his knees. "I fixed it like you asked. Please, let me go home. It's been 40 years. The radio in my dead car, despite having no battery power, flared to life one last time. Shift, change." The mechanic scrambled toward me, his eyes wild with a mixture of hope and madness. He didn't look at me as a savior. He looked at me like I was a spare part. "Give me the keys!" he shrieked, lunging for the Ford. "The contract is transferred. You brought him, so you keep him." "What are you talking about?" I yelled, backing away. "Who is that?" The mechanic didn't answer. He dove into the driver's seat of my car. He slammed the door and cranked the ignition. The engine turned over. A healthy, roaring start that shouldn't have been possible for a car that had just died completely. "I'm out! I'm finally out!" the mechanic laughed, a hysterical, wet sound. He slammed the car into reverse, tires spinning on the ancient asphalt, preparing to leave me stranded at the edge of the world with the invisible thing. But the car didn't move backward. It stalled. The laughter cut off abruptly. The mechanic turned the key again. Click, click, click. From the darkness in front of the car, where the invisible footsteps had stopped, The air began to warp. It looked like heat haze rising from pavement, twisting into a vertical column. Thud. A dent appeared in the hood of my Ford. Then another, closer to the windshield. Something was walking over the car. "No!" the mechanic screamed, locking the doors. "No! I served my time. I drove the night shift for 40 years. It's his turn." The windshield didn't shatter. It melted. The glass dissolved like sugar in hot water, dripping onto the dashboard. The mechanic flailed, trying to scramble into the back seat, but an invisible force grabbed him by the ankles. I watched, frozen in horror, as the man was dragged out through the windshield hole. He clawed at the hood, leaving bloody streaks on the white paint, screaming pleas to a god that clearly didn't have jurisdiction on this road. He was lifted into the air, suspended by his neck. His legs kicked uselessly. Then, with a casual flick, the invisible force tossed him backward. He sailed over the edge of the cliff. The scream lasted for 3 seconds before being swallowed by the canyon darkness. There was no sound of impact. Silence returned. The lightning overhead stopped. The wind died. I was alone. I turned to run. I didn't care where. Into the desert, into the spikes, anywhere but here. I took 3 steps before the headlights of my Ford flickered back to life. They were blindingly bright, pinning me against the dark. The horn honked. Once, expectantly. The passenger door opened. "No!" I whimpered. "I'm not driving you." The radio blasted to life, so loud it echoed off the canyon walls. "Shift begins." My legs moved on their own. It was that same sensation from the highway, the physical compulsion overriding my brain. I walked back to the car like a puppet on strings. I sat in the driver's seat. The smell of the mechanic's fear, sweat and urine was thick in the air. The passenger door slammed shut. The seat dipped. The seatbelt clicked. Fran, Sis, Co, the radio static purred. "Drive." I put the car in reverse. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove. We navigated the ghost highway in silence. As the sun began to bleed a pale grey light over the horizon, the spikes and license plates faded away, replaced by the familiar sagebrush of Highway 50. I'm in California now. I made it to San Francisco. I paid off my gambling debts with the money I had. I even got a job valeting cars at a hotel, but I can't leave the car. I sleep in it. I eat in it. Because every time I try to open the door to get out, the lock clicks down. And every night when the sun sets, the passenger seat dips down and the radio turns on. He doesn't want to go to a destination anymore. He just likes the motion. So I drive the highways every night looking for the next lonely road, praying that one day I'll see a car with a driver tired enough to stop, so I can switch shifts. Jude is still out there, driving the endless loop of the night shift. Maybe you've passed him. Maybe you saw a beat-up Ford LTD on the shoulder and thought about pulling over to help. If you see him, keep driving. The passenger seat is always looking for a new weight to balance the scales. If this story made you check your rearview mirror, please subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. We have plenty of miles left to cover in the dark, and I don't want you to get left behind. Here is my question for you. If you saw someone standing perfectly still in the middle of a desert highway at 2 a.m., be honest. Would you stop to help? Or would you speed up like Jude? And tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep your eyes on the road and never look in the back seat.